Good evening, and welcome to ABN's Jihad Watch program. I'm Robert Spencer, and tonight we have a very interesting and timely presentation for you. It has been in the headlines recently that People for the American Way, a well-known far-left advocacy group here in the United States, has petitioned John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, with a petition consisting of 178,000 signatures, asking that Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann not be reappointed to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Now, Bachmann's crime, as far as the People for the American Way goes, is that she called several months ago for an investigation into Muslim Brotherhood infiltration into the United States government. Now, why this would concern a far-left group so much that they would not want Bachmann reappointed to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence is an interesting example of the leftist Islamic alliance and the fact that leftist elements in the United States are not only working with, but are actively collaborating and enabling collaborating with and enabling Islamic supremacist groups in the United States. The leftist Islamic alliance is something that many people have noticed, but few people have explained, and no one has explained it more cogently, more compellingly, and more fully than our guest tonight, Dr. Jamie Glazov. Dr. Glazov, of course, is the editor of FrontPageMagazine.com, and he is the author of one of the most important books that has been written over the last 10 years, and that book is United in Hate. United in Hate is a deep exploration of the leftist Islamic alliance and an elucidation of what it is that these groups see in each other that makes them seek each other out as colleagues and partners when they superficially seem to be so very different and so very far apart. And so, Jamie, are you with us?
It's a great pleasure and privilege to be here with you, Robert.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have you, and I hoped that you would explain from United in Hate what exactly is going on here. We can discuss, in the first place, why People for the American Way is targeting Congresswoman Bachmann and what the circumstances of that targeting are. But I was hoping also that you could explain for us tonight why the left and Islamic supremacist groups in the United States and worldwide, as a matter of fact, are tied together. And so tell me, in the first place, United in Hate, you wrote that in what year?
2009 it was published, but in many ways, Robert, I've been writing this book since I was 13 years old. But, you know, it took me a couple of years, but it was published in 2009.
In the book, I think that it's practically a blueprint for what we see happening with Congresswoman Bachmann and People for the American Way now. Why in the first place do you think that People for the American Way would go to the trouble of collecting 178,000 signatures to keep Bachmann off the House Select Committee on Intelligence?
Absolutely, Robert. Well, look, there's so much to talk about here. Let me just say that, like I said, at the age of 13, my parents were freedom fighters in the Soviet Union. We lived under the evil empire, a system that mass murder. It massacred millions of people. Communism massacred millions of people. We came to the United States, a land of freedom, and my whole life I grew up and watched the left siding with our persecutors, siding with our monsters. And this is what began to interest me. And today, Robert, we see this political pilgrimage continuing. But now the jihadists have replaced the communists.
Avast virus database.
Oh, I'm very sorry for that. This is my anti-virus announcement. I apologize. But the jihadis have replaced the communists in terms of the entity, the totalitarian entity that the left wants to worship and support. So let's skip ahead here for a minute, and then you can pave the road in terms of what we will be discussing. Robert, the left is always on the side of the adversary culture and adversary system, the adversary totalitarian ideology, because the left and leftists, they want to destroy their host society. They hate capitalism. They hate free enterprise. They hate the individual. They hate freedom and liberty. Guess what? the people that perpetrated ground zero, that's in their interest because they are allies in this whole venture to destroy Western civilization. Now, when I speak like this, when you speak like this, we are ridiculed by leftists. We are always slandered and smeared. Oh, you're crazy. Oh, was this a conspiracy theory? What are you talking about? And yet, the people that criticize us end up doing exactly what we say that they're doing. So in other words, we're saying that the left is allied with radical jihad with radical Muslims. The left says we're crazy. There is no unholy alliance. Yet we have a hero, Michelle Bachmann, who with 4 other brave senators, congresspeople, want an investigation into Muslim Brotherhood penetration of the White House, of our government. Instead of siding with Michelle Bachmann, they want her gone, because if you stigmatize the resistance to jihad, as you have explained, Robert, then you're enabling jihad. So by crippling the voices, by crippling the actions of those people who want to protect our society, the left is enabling our enemies. Is this not the unholy alliance? So today we see a hero, Michelle Bachmann, who this petition is against her now. She's on this intelligence committee. She's a hero. She should be chairing that committee, as you said the other day in your wonderful and brilliant article at Front Page. But the unholy alliance is right before us, Robert. The left is crippling our attempt to fight jihad.
Now, we know from a captured internal document that was released during the Holy Land Foundation trial, the trial of the largest Islamic charity in the United States at that time. In 2007, when the Holy Land Foundation was on trial, there was a raid of its offices, and much of the material that was found there was released. One of the most noteworthy documents that was found in that raid was an explanatory memorandum about the goals and strategy of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. And it said, and I quote, that the brothers must understand that their work in the United States is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house so that it falls and Allah's religion reigns supreme over other religions. Now, what you're saying is that the left hates America and hates Western civilization so much that they are interested in impeding anybody who is trying to stop that Muslim Brotherhood program from being implemented. Is that right?
Absolutely, Robert. And the explanatory memorandum that you bring up is crucial. This is not us saying it. This is the Muslim Brotherhood saying that it's gonna and wants to destroy the United States from within. It's talking about all its plans on how it can do it. And also, by the way, it includes manipulating these leftist groups, so they're useful idiots and part of the whole plan. And yet the left, even though when you present this evidence to them, is still on these people's side. It is because they want to destroy this society. Let me give you an example. Look, leftists in general, they want to build their classless utopia on this earth. They're dreaming of socialism. They're dreaming of abolishing capitalism. They want their classless utopia. The jihadists want their Sharia utopia. Both of those utopias need to be built on the ashes of the earth that they want to destroy. So they share this common ground of ground zero, because it is on those ashes that they will build their paradise. And you know what I find so interesting, Robert, and intriguing, is that whenever I talk about this, I look at the comment sections of leftists who follow me and slander me and smear me and people like you and great heroes like David Horowitz and Pamela Geller, Brigitte Gabriel, and they laugh at me. The other day I was watching some of their commentaries, and they were saying, oh, as if a classless society is so bad. This idiot is trying to demonize a classless society. Robert, in other words, they support building a classless society. But Robert, we know from the history of the 20th century, from the millions and millions of people that were sacrificed on the altar of utopian ideals, we know that a classless society is inseparable from its terrorist component. There has to be Stalinism. There has to be Mao. There has to be the Khmer Rouge. So, while they ridicule us for warning about the classless society, they want to build the classless society. But Robert, the only way you build a classless society is by destroying capitalism and free enterprise. No wonder it wasn't just the Palestinians that were handing out candies after 9/11. It was the American left that was celebrating, and I documented in United in Hate. David Horowitz has documented it on Holy Alliance. We had everyone from Norman Mailer to Oliver Stone to Eric Foner. The left, there was a cheer and a glee in the left, because on the ashes of ground zero is where they will build their classless utopia. So you have this shared interest between the left and Jihad that has replaced the romance of the left with communism. And again, we're seeing it today. We have the evidence of the explanatory memorandum. We have heroes like Michelle Bachmann pointing at Huma Abedin, Muslim Brotherhood. Huma Abedin's father, her mother, her brother, Muslim Brotherhood. She worked for an organization, Institute of Muslim Minority Affairs, for 12 years, the editor of a journal for that institute. Muslim Brotherhood. Why isn't there a security clearance for this deputy chief of staff for Hillary Clinton? And instead of looking into those people, the left wants to demonize the people that want to look into these enemies of the United States in our government today. And it's very worrying, Robert.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a minute. You mentioned Huma Abedin. Now, Huma Abedin is the top aide to the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. And as you have said, she worked for a Muslim Brotherhood organization for 12 years. Her parents and her brother are active in the Muslim Brotherhood. She has never repudiated the Brotherhood, never distanced herself from the Islam as it is that is practiced by her family. And so there's certainly every reason for suspicion that she is also affiliated with, or at very least sympathetic to, the Muslim Brotherhood. But all that said, Huma Abedin is not in the government. She is an aide to the Secretary of State. There's no indication necessarily that she has any influence on the Secretary of State's outlook or policies. As far as I know, she just keeps her appointments, makes sure she gets from here to there, and so on. And so really, aren't you just exaggerating this whole problem? Or shall we say, isn't Congresswoman Bachmann exaggerating this whole problem?
Robert, she is inside the loop. This is the Alger Hiss phenomenon. We had Alger Hiss during the Cold War at the right-hand side of Roosevelt. Because of him, all of Eastern Europe was lost when they gave him to Stalin. Let's forget what you have access to. And by the way, let's discuss who has access to what, because those other names that, by the way, Michelle Bachmann was concerned about.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to get to. Absolutely. And we'll be discussing all of them.
Absolutely. But let's just talk about Huma Abedin. You're at the right-hand side. You're hearing all the conversations. You're able to whisper things into the ear of the highest officials. And here's the key. I know you're just playing the devil's advocate. But if people just say, oh, well, she doesn't have access to this document or this document, the crucial thing here is that she is inside the loop. And why can't there just be a security clearance? That's all number one. That's the first step. Why isn't there a security clearance to an individual that's at the right-hand side of Hillary Clinton and has Muslim Brotherhood connections to an organization that itself is screaming from the rooftops that it wants to impose Sharia throughout the world, which means the destruction of the United States and its Constitution? Why is a person like this in our government? We should have other people in our government. You should be speaking to Hillary Clinton's ear. So should Nani Darwish. So should David Horowitz, Frank Gaffney, Daniel Pipes. Those are the people that are supposed to be Hillary Clinton's deputy chief of staff.
Well, you know, Jamie, I think you raise a very important point, many very important points in that. I mean, one of them is we can clarify this simply by making an analogy, that if the Secretary of State of the United States had a top aide whose mother, father, and brother were in the Ku Klux Klan and who had worked for a Klan organization herself for 12 years, I expect there would be quite a bit of outcry in the mainstream media calling for the resignation of the aide, if not of the Secretary of State herself. And the fact that there is absolutely none about this indicates that there is charitably a tremendous moral myopia on the part of the left and on a part of the mainstream media that is dominated by leftists, or a complicit acknowledgement that this is something that is actually to be desired, to be fostered. Also, you said that, well, maybe she doesn't have access to this document or that document, but that also, as we know, is unlikely. That somebody with Huma Abedin's reach, somebody with her access to the Secretary of State, who is with the Secretary of State at all hours, at all the time, at everything that the Secretary of State goes to, she's there, she's in on it. It's very unlikely that there's anything that Clinton has access to that is not available to Huma Abedin. And so it raises all kinds of questions that ought to be pursued if we had a responsible journalistic class in the United States today.
And Robert, here's the key point. There's so much to say, but here's the key point. I have dedicated years of my life to Muslim girls, to the freedom of Muslim girls, to protect Muslim women from female genital mutilation, from acid attacks, from honor killings, and forced segregation and forced marriage. I lose sleep at night worrying about these girls that suffer under Islamic gender apartheid. And I'm the Islamophobe. I'm accused of being the Islamophobe. You're accused of being Islamophobic. Pamela Geller, that built an epitaph, a tombstone for Aqsa Parvez, a 16-year-old girl that was strangled by her Muslim father in Toronto because she wanted to be a free girl and live a Canadian life. It was Pamela Geller that went out of her way to make sure that that young girl's life would be remembered. And yet, we are labeled Islamophobes.
Well,
we are called the haters, whereas in fact it is the left that is heartless. It is the left that has abandoned these poor Muslim women, and here's why. Because it's an adversary culture and religion. This is the key. When you brought up the Ku Klux Klan, if George Bush was president and his Secretary of State had somebody in the Klan being a deputy chief of staff, they would be gone in 2 minutes. There might even be an impeachment of Bush, for God's sakes. But here's the key. Islam gets exemption. Islam gets another deal because the left is enchanted with the enemies of the United States. And that is why today there is no media reporting on what I just mentioned, the Islamic gender apartheid. When is Anderson Cooper going to do a feature on Islamic honor killings and have a denunciation of the Islamic theology that serves as a buffer to Islamic gender apartheid? It's not happening. And the reason it's not happening is the same reason that Michelle Bachmann is being attacked by these leftist groups.
Absolutely. You know something else? You mentioned Islamophobia, and you note quite rightly, of course, that all of us who speak out about the human rights abuses that are inherent in Islamic law, all of us who speak out about the warlike, the violence, the violent elements within the Islamic theology and law, the warlike theology that mandates warfare against and subjugation of unbelievers, the institutionalized discrimination against women, the institutionalized discrimination against non-Muslims, the denial of the freedom of speech, all of us who speak out against these human rights abuses that are part and parcel of Islamic law are branded as Islamophobes, but by whom? Note this, we're talking about Muslim Brotherhood infiltration into the government, for which bringing it up got Congresswoman Bachmann so roundly criticized, and now this petition drive taken out. But the main groups in the United States that are representing or purporting to represent the Muslim community are also Muslim Brotherhood organizations. The Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, the Muslim American Society, the Muslim Students Association, the Islamic Society of North America, the Islamic Circle of North America, the North American Islamic Trust, on and on and on. These groups or their parent groups or allied groups were all listed in that same captured internal document of the Muslim Brotherhood detailing its plans for eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. And they are the main exponents of this whole Islamophobia narrative. And so it all fits very neatly together that Muslim Brotherhood organizations in the U.S. brand those who are trying to call attention to Muslim Brotherhood influence and power in the U.S. as haters and Islamophobes. Muslim Brotherhood organizations in the U.S. brand as Islamophobes and hate mongers and bigots those who dare to call attention to the human rights abuses of Islam. And so I also wanted to remind you before we go on, the phone lines are open. You can call us at 248-416-1300. That number again, 248-416-1300 if you'd like to weigh in on these issues. And Jamie, now back to Congresswoman Bachmann. There were others that she named in this in her call for an investigation several months ago as being Muslim Brotherhood operatives in the United States government. Besides Huma Abedin, most of the media attention focused on Huma Abedin, but can you tell us about some of the others?
Well, let me even begin with Muhammad Ali Biyari. And you wrote about him in your article for Front Page yesterday. It's published today. I recommend all of our listeners and viewers to go read it. He's a member of the Homeland Security Advisory Council. Now, Robert, you're an expert on this individual as well, but this is a man that's in the Obama government. And Robert, mistake me if I'm wrong, but in 2004 or around that time, he was invited to an event that was praising the Ayatollah Khomeini.
Yes, that's right. He spoke there. He was one of the featured speakers. It was an event.
And they were.
It was dedicated to a tribute, it said, a tribute to the great Islamic visionary. And it was a conference in Dallas, Texas in December 2004. I have published the poster for it on my website, Jihad Watch. You can readily find it there. It's a number of speakers, including Ali Biyari and another imam, Kavatsi, who has actually given a prayer at Democratic National Committee meetings. But in any case, Ali Biyari spoke there. And a few months after that, I was speaking at a conference in Dallas, and Ali Biyari came and was in the audience to apparently to take notes on all the wicked Islamophobia that was going down. And I got into a conversation with him after the conference, and he assured me that he did not know what the Khomeini conference was supposed to be about, and that he wouldn't have spoken there if he had. But it's amazing to me that these flimsy excuses are accepted from these Islamic supremacist spokesmen. Imagine if you, Jamie, had been invited to a conference and it was not represented to you properly, and when you got there, you found out that it was a Klan meeting. I don't think you would go ahead and speak, but Ali Biyari went ahead and spoke at this Khomeini conference. Yeah. And now he expects us to believe that, oh, it was all a mistake and he was misled. And what's worse about this is that it's taken seriously by the Homeland Security Advisory Council. So what about this guy? What else is there to know about him? Yes.
Robert, but that's only the beginning, and we very well know what's in this individual's heart and why you would even be at that event. Listen, the Texas Department of Public Safety, how about this one? We know the excellent reporting that's done by journalist Patrick Poole that writes for Front Page now and again. He used to write for us more frequently in the past. A fantastic, brilliant journalist. Now, he unearthed that this individual, we know that he has access to intelligence gathering between intelligence agencies and law enforcement. He came up, he has access to this information. He went to a leftist media outlet and tried to get them to do a report on Islamophobia in the Texas Department of Public Safety. This is documented. This is a fact. In other words, we have somebody in the U.S. government who is taking intelligence data, trying to give it to leftist media to spread the charge of Islamophobia in our law enforcement agencies so it can be stopped. What is this guy doing? Number one, engaged in that kind of activity. Number two, what is he doing in the American government? Number three, why is this not being discussed tonight on the front page of the New York Times, on Anderson Cooper, on Piers Morgan, on MSNBC? You would think that this would be being discussed because it's Ali Biyari, correct?
Ali Biyari.
My pronunciation sometimes isn't immaculate.
We know who you mean.
This individual and what he is engaging in, Robert, is the fertile soil for more Fort Hoods. Because what it's doing is it's crippling the people that are trying to point the picture at trying to point their finger at the threat. It's demonizing and crippling them and allowing the Nidal Hassans to get their ammunition and to come in shooting. And this is a very dire situation. And Michelle Bachmann is a hero for pointing her finger at this situation. And it is shameless and shameful that our media and even our government is demonizing her.
It is indeed. And it's shameful also that the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, has repudiated her in calling for an investigation of Muslim Brotherhood infiltration into the government. He has said that that was out of line and she shouldn't have done that. You got to wonder, what's Boehner thinking, if he's thinking at all? Is he compromised himself in some way? Is he being blackmailed? Does he really think that somebody like Muhammad Ali Biari or somebody like Huma Abedin or somebody like some of the others that are named in Bachman's statements of concern, that they don't matter, that the evidence is not there? I have no idea what he could possibly be thinking. What do you think is going on in the Republican Party that they're not getting behind Bachman?
Robert, these leftists, the left, when I was a little boy at the age of 13, 14, and 15, and I began to look at at university professors that used to come over to our house and call my father a fascist and tell him to shut up when he tried to say even one remote word of criticism about the Soviet Union. I know these leftists very well. Now, when I was a kid, it worried me, and I was thinking, what if they ever gain power? Oh, thank God Ronald Reagan is in power. Today, the people that frightened me, that horrified me, these people are in our government. They are leading our government, and they have taken control of the media. The left has succeeded, Robert, in molding the boundaries of our debate. What the left has done is achieve this, that if you say one word of criticism of an adversary culture, of an adversary religion, of a totalitarian ideology, you are immediately labeled a racist and a bigot. They have succeeded in this. And so there is a Stockholm syndrome in our government, in our Republican Party even, where people are terrified and afraid not to be cool or to be accused of being a racist. So again, Fort Hood, we had a psychiatrist, a doctor, Nidal Hassan, giving lectures that unbelievers should have acid poured down their throats. Nobody complained because they were afraid of being labeled a racist. And because of that, because of those boundaries of discourse that the left has shaped, we know what happened at Fort Hood. And that's why the silence is occurring in our government today, because there is a terrifying fear among so many people in our media and government of being branded by this brush. And you know that very well, Robert, because you're not afraid, David Horowitz isn't afraid, Pamela Geller is not afraid, and you're paying the price for it.
Jamie, what you're saying is really extraordinary. It reminds me of what happened with the Fort Dick Six. The Fort Dick Six, you may recall, were a group of Islamic jihadis who had plans. They were plotting to drive a jeep into Fort Dix and kill as many American soldiers as possible in the name of jihad and Islam before they were themselves killed. But they were caught, and they were caught in this way. They were caught because they were stupid. They had various gory videos, beheading videos, as well as Al-Qaeda material, Osama bin Laden speaking, that kind of thing. They had them on VHS tapes, and they took them to a local video store and asked that they be transferred to DVD. And so there was this teenage kid, this young man working in the video store, and he's doing the job, transferring these VHS tapes to the DVDs, and he sees all this horrible Islamic jihadi blood and gore. And he was brought up short, and he realized, these guys could be very dangerous. And so he, to his credit, he went to his manager and asked him what to do. But what he said about it was extraordinary and chilling. And what he said was, should I go to the police, or would that be racist? Should I go to the police,
Absolutely,
or would that be racist?
Absolutely.
Think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
But what's really the worst thing about what you're saying is that Boehner, the Speaker of the House, the leader in government right now of the Republican Party, the only opposition party of any significance in the United States, and he's manifesting the same kind of cowardice and fear before the politically correct juggernaut. It's astonishing.
Absolutely, Robert. Look, let me even crystallize this in a simple way. Let me just make this one statement. Our Western civilization is superior. The Islamic civilization is inferior. Just by me even saying those words, I even get a little bit scared, because I even start thinking in terms of all the thoughts in my head and goes, oh, am I a racist? Because those words are not allowed to be spoken today. We are not allowed to be proud of our civilization. We are not allowed to say that it's better. But guess what? Our civilization is better than another civilization that pushes young 15, 14-year-old girls back into a burning building because they don't have their veils
Absolutely. Jamie,
and
you're
burqas
absolutely
on.
right. Jamie, this is a very important
And
point. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are at a break. And so we're going to take a minute or two for some very important messages, and we'll be right back after these messages.
You are watching ABN.
Hi, this is David Wood from Jesus or Muhammad. As I'm sure you've heard, ABN has some significant financial needs. A lot of the equipment here is either outdated or damaged, and it's affecting the broadcast. I'll say ABN does a great job with what they have, but they could be doing much more if they had some newer equipment, some newer cameras. And so I encourage everyone to support the work that's going on here. We'd like to have more broadcasts, more shows, more programs, and we can only do that through financial donations. And so I encourage everyone out there to contribute whatever you can. And beyond all of this, apart from the technical needs, there's also the security needs given the increase in threats. And so if ABN is going to continue carrying on this work, they're going to need your support as they always have. And so as as we end out the year and you're thinking about where you'd like to donate, I don't think you'll find a better place than ABN.
And welcome back to ABN's Jihad Watch program. I'm Robert Spencer, and we're here tonight with Dr. Jamie Glazov, the world-renowned expert on the leftist Islamic Alliance, which has been in the news yet again with Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann's being targeted by People for the American Way with a 178,000 name petition asking that she not be reappointed to the House Select Committee on Intelligence. And given the repudiation that House Speaker John Boehner has given to her calls for the Muslim Brotherhood to be investigated in the United States, I think that it is possible that Boehner will give way to this leftist intimidation. Before we go back to Dr. Glazov, we have a couple of calls. Mike, you're on the air. Mike, are you there?
Oh, thank you very much. I love you guys. And before I get started with my question, I just want to tell everybody that's listening to this program that everybody should immediately make a donation, $1, $5, $10, $100, but make a donation. You guys need the money, and we need the help. So
Thank you.
With that, let's see. I work for an organization, Act for America, run that in Central Florida, and I noticed that we see pushback in Europe, we see pushback in Belgium, and we have to get pushback here. I'm very disappointed in our our senators, our congressmen, most of our elected leaders. And I think we have to educate the grassroots, and I think that's where we have to start. So they put pressure on our congressmen. I don't think we're going to be very effective dealing with the Obama administration at all. I don't think we can change it. I don't think we can affect it. We can talk about it. We can fear it, but I don't think we'll do it. My question is, how can we, what do you recommend that we do to move our agenda along? I mean, you and I have the same agenda, Robert, and your other fellow there too.
Jamie?
What can we do to move our agenda along?
Jamie, what do you think? What can we do? What must we do now to move our agenda along to defend freedom and to roll back the leftist Islamic alliance?
Well, Robert, that's the question. And the tragedy is that conservatives do not know how to fight political war. And the left knows how to fight political war. We are losing. The ship is sinking quickly. But Robert, you and I are going to be scooping the water out of this sinking ship till our last breath. Now, what can we do? Well, to begin with, things like this. We have to become more active, more speech. We have to get out there. We have to start speaking more. We have to get in touch with our public officials, with our representatives. We have to start having more town halls. The key is speech and activism. We have to try to find a way through speaking and through activism to start taking the terrain back and putting more and more pressure on the media and supporting people like you and Pamela Geller, like David Horowitz, and like discoverthenetworks.org over at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, the site that shows how the Unholy Alliance works. But look, what Pamela Geller and you yourself, Robert, are doing with those ads in the subway systems, in the bus, with the buses, this is crucial. This is one fantastic tactic because it's getting the truth out there about jihad and about the violent teachings in Islamic theology. So it's activism like this that we're all engaged in that is crucial.
Absolutely. You know, it has to be remembered. People come up to me all the time when I speak around the country, and I'm sure this happens to you as well, and they say, what can I do, as if there's something special about us that we're doing something and they're not. There's no difference between Pamela Geller and Jamie Glazov and David Horowitz and any free citizen in the United States. All you have to do is look around you and see what is going on, what the left is doing, what the Islamic supremacists are doing, and take steps to raise awareness of what's going on, to marshal other people to fight against it, to put pressure on our elected officials to stand up against it. One of the things
May I make a suggestion?
I'm sorry? Yeah, please do.
I think that one of our most effective tools, as you know, the Organization for Islamic Committees has their own human rights charter. And if you look at that human rights charter, it allows slavery. It allows only one religion. I think we should go after them on a human rights issue because liberals love human rights. I think we can affect the liberals and the left more with human rights than we can attacking Islam directly. So my suggestion is that we get a good package of human rights issues and hit them in the head with that. I don't think they can stand up and say you're a phobia anything when you get on human rights.
Well, Mike, you know, we have framed our message as being in defense of the freedom of speech, the freedom of conscience, the equality of rights of all people. This is how we constantly present what we're doing, and that is the basis for all that we're doing. And it is very important, of course, to remember that these people are not playing fair. The human rights issue is a very good way to show up the hypocrisy of the left and the hypocrisy of the Islamic supremacists. At the same time, what we have to do is get enough of a forum, even to be able to be heard. And see, this is where, Jamie, you mentioned the ads that Pamela Geller has put in subways and buses and so on, and some of them that I have helped develop, and I'm very proud to be able to say that, because what she's doing and what Congresswoman Bachmann is doing by calling for investigation of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States government, both are different ways to break out of the reservation. The left is perfectly happy to let conservatives speak if we are just, you know, listening to Rush Limbaugh, talking to small groups of fellow conservatives, and we're just in our circumscribed place and not affecting the larger culture. But what Pamela Geller has done with these ads, and what Michelle Bachmann is doing by calling for an investigation of Muslim Brotherhood infiltration into the government, is breaking through, breaking out of that reservation and forcing the mainstream media to discuss issues that it does not wish to discuss. Now, anybody can do this. This is the core point, is that the only difference between an activist and somebody who is not an activist is that the person who is not an activist has not yet become active. But all you have to do is see where you can break out of the reservation and where you can force a public discussion, a public debate about these issues that the left would rather leave aside. Now, you're very right, Mike, that one of them is the human rights abuses that are fostered by, that are furthered and propagated by groups like the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, as they call themselves now, and they do that in the name of Islamic law. And so for the left to be focused on helping out a group that institutionalizes this kind of dehumanization and discrimination against women and non-Muslims and so on is completely at variance with its stated principles. Although I think Jamie has a very important point to bring to bear about how they both share an authoritarian and totalitarian impulse that is at variance with the stated principles of justice and human rights and so on. But nonetheless, shining light on that hypocrisy is something that is not only very important, but educative for the American public that is not aware of what is going on, and can illuminate a great deal that can lead to greater action. Thanks so much for calling. And now we have another caller.
I bless you guys. I love you guys. You're wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you. And,
Robert, can I say something very quickly?
Please do. Please do.
Robert, look, when I saw Pamela Geller, what was her name on CNN? Erin Burnett?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, what a shameless behavior on the part of Burnett. And during that whole discussion, she says to Pamela Geller, "Oh, have you ever read the Quran?" As if there's something in the Quran that Burnett knows that Pamela Geller doesn't know. Here's my point. We should have had 200,000 people sign a petition and send it to CNN and confront Burnett on the Quran and what she knows on the Quran, and provide the quotes, provide the teachings, and demand in a huge petition, the same way the left is making a petition against Michelle Bachmann. We make petitions every day against Geraldo, the way he treated Pamela Geller, the way you're treated, the way Burnett treated Pamela Geller, and we confront these people in our media with petitions of hundreds of thousands of people signing them, demanding for them to take a stand on human rights, on the teachings of the Quran that preach hatred of the kafir and the infidel, and on Islamic gender apartheid, etc., etc. I'm just saying, here's a good example where we are not doing anything as conservatives.
Yes, Jamie, you know, I remember very well the clip that you're talking about, because Pamela and I put together a documentary about the Ground Zero Mosque controversy, and that clip is included in the documentary. You can find that on Amazon. But what's really remarkable, because that led to my seeing that clip and several others that are in the documentary hundreds of times as we were putting the thing together, and so I practically have it memorized. Erin Burnett then had on a Muslim spokesman, and she asked him, "Is there some verse in the Quran that some people think is violent?" As if there were just one. And the guy actually then says that there are a lot of erroneous translations out there, as if Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Anwar al-Awlaki and thousands of other Islamic jihadis around the world are committing violence in the name of Islam because of erroneous translations. The absurdity of it boggles the mind. And one wonders, is Erin Burnett really that ignorant? And of course she may be, but that's our job, to pierce through that ignorance.
And look, and let's bring up an analogy. Imagine a TV anchor saying to somebody, "Haven't you ever read Mein Kampf?" and you know, even the way that Burnett was speaking, it was almost with tears in her eyes about the Quran, and the assumption, the premise between the lines is that there's this just beautiful book. Why aren't you reading it and understanding it? They need to be confronted with your work, with David Horowitz's work, with Pipes' work. They need to be confronted with the Quranic teachings, and CNN and these institutions need to be confronted with petitions. That's just one example where they either confront these people or they fire these people. This is just complete unprofessionalism that a freedom fighter hero like Pamela Geller is spoken down to by a completely ignorant person who herself has never read the Quran, and
Yes.
she still has a job.
Well, you know, Jamie, that brings us to, I think, the main point. Mike, the caller, he was saying, you know, what can we do? And I think the main thing we have to do is to continue to raise awareness in every place we can, in every way we can. Speak to our coworkers, speak to our neighbors, speak to our friends and relatives, and work to inform ourselves in the first place, and then to convince them of the nature and the magnitude of the threats that we face in regard to the leftist Islamic alliance. Because we don't get 200,000 signatures to CNN. We don't get these kinds of protests about this flagrantly biased and stupid coverage because most people are not aware that that's what's being shown. They're not aware of the lies that they're being told. And so the first thing we have to do is do everything we can to raise up a large group of Americans who are informed, aware, and committed and determined to protect freedom. We have another caller. Jim, you've been very patient. Are you still with us? Jim?
I'm still here. Robert.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for calling.
Okay, sir. I think you've mostly answered my question. I did tune in a little bit late, but basically I decided a while back that nobody could be that naive. I mean, nobody could fail to read 911 or 4.74 or Surah 61, 10 through 13, and all of the rest of it. I mean, it's so clear. It says it so clearly.
Absolutely, yes. And so
98, Al-Kufurun. I'll probably mispronounce that. But
Kafirun,
you know
yeah,
exactly
they haven't read it. They don't know what's in there. I mean, even the nature of, in the particular clip that we've been discussing, even the nature of Erin Burnett's question, when she asked the Muslim spokesman, is there some verse in the Quran that's objectionable? When we know there are over 100 jihad verses. There are many verses. There are 3 places where it says, kill the pagans wherever you find them. There is another verse that's separate from those 3 that talks about waging war against and subjugating the Jews and Christians, making them pay a special tax. There is 2 other places talking about beheading the unbelievers, and dozens and dozens and dozens of other passages enjoining the Muslims to fight against the unbelievers in terms that are unmistakably about military warfare, not about spiritual warfare or having discussions with them or something of that kind. And so it's only ignorance. It's perhaps a willful blindness, yes, but it's absolutely inexcusable at this point that our media spokesman and government and even law enforcement is determined not to examine this material.
And Robert, if I could interrupt quickly, a point that you make that's so important, because then the leftist comeback is, and there has to be a comeback, because the totalitarian enemy has to be exempted and forgiven and exonerated. But they'll then say, but this is a misunderstanding. You have to understand the larger context. They're misunderstood. You're not getting the right message. Here's the key. Instead of sermoning Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller and the messengers or the warners in our society about misunderstanding, is you yourself always stress this vital point. You go and confront the terrorists that are quote-unquote misunderstanding. You confront every jihadi. Every time there's a terrorist attack, you go to the Muslim world and confront the people who are perpetrating these violent attacks and confront the teachings that inspire these attacks. Don't attack the people that are warning us about these attacks. Attack the theology that's causing the attacks.
Absolutely, Jamie, absolutely. And you know, it's funny, you mentioned that they always say that when we quote the Quran, that we're taking something out of context. Just today, Mohammed Morsi, the president of Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt, there was recently, last January 3rd, which is now 13 days ago, almost 2 weeks ago, the Middle East Media Research Institute published a video from 2010 in which Morsi calls Jews bloodsuckers and apes and pigs. Now, of course, we know that the Quran, in chapter 2, verses 63 to 65, chapter 5, verses 59 to 60, and chapter 7, verse 166, calls Jews apes and pigs. And so Morsi, as a pious Muslim, was just quoting the Quran. But it's nonetheless, it's hateful words, it's incitement to violence, and it's obviously something that civilized people should not countenance. And so here's the president of Egypt calling Jews apes and pigs, as well as bloodsuckers and all sorts of other things, and making it clear where he stands is deeply rooted Islamic anti-Semitism. The mainstream media said nothing about it, but then Richard Behar at Forbes wrote a very incisive piece in which he detailed how much the mainstream media was ignoring this, perhaps goaded and embarrassed into action. The New York Times reported on it a few days ago, and now it's become a big controversy. And Morsi said that his statements were taken out of context. Now you got to wonder, what does he think? I mean, he must think we're morons. What kind of context makes it justifiable to call Jews apes and pigs? What kind of context it makes that okay? And what's really worse about it is that the mainstream media will take this seriously and have no problem with it.
But Robert, here's the key. This is very, very serious. It's not just a whole bunch of leftists in some university. They're in the White House. We have an American president who pulled the rug from under the feet of Mubarak, telling him he needs to go. When Morsi comes into power, cancels out the power of the judiciary, and arrogates power to himself, makes himself a tyrant. Sharia is on the way in Egypt. Egyptians go into the streets and start demanding freedom. They're cracked down on, and Obama doesn't say one word. Instead, you know what he does? He makes a deal to send F-16s to Morsi. This is showing where our president, where our administration stands. This is the unholy alliance. It's not just Sean Penn visiting Castro or Chavez. This isn't just Noam Chomsky embracing Nasrallah in Lebanon. This isn't Naomi Klein at The Nation writing Bring Najaf to New York in one of her columns for The Nation magazine. These people have captured power in the White House, and they have enabled the Islamists to take power in the entire Middle East. And now they have infiltrated the administration, and our media, I would argue, is criminal for not investigating this and shining a light on it. We're in very big trouble, Robert.
Absolutely, Jamie, and I don't think that can be understated. We have a couple more callers. Nabil, are you there? Nabil. Hello?
I really appreciate the program and your guest, a wonderful program.
Thank you.
I would like to add to the complication that we have. In Texas, it came to my knowledge that Muslims are adopting the kids that are the orphans and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So they have ready-made kids to be Islamized immediately.
Huh. I haven't heard this.
Where our government from this? We got to stand and enlighten and send the congressmen and senators telling them stop this immediately.
Well, you know,
they are turning the whole thing from inside, like what your guest there said, from inside, imploding the system.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And this is a weakness in the American system that I don't know how it could possibly be addressed, because unless the parents who are adopting have establishable ties to terrorist groups, then there really isn't any objection that any government official or any politician could raise. Because we refuse. Well, Nabil, you know, you see, this is how false ideas lead to bad policy. That because we are not willing to recognize in the political system the political and supremacist aspects of Islam, and the fact that it's much more than just a religion, we cannot take any legislative action against it, because all of it is blocked on the basis of the First Amendment freedom of religion. Nobody seems to recognize it's very important that everybody's freedom of religion be granted, but where the religious entity crosses over into the political sphere, then it ought to be subject to all the requirements the political groups are required to meet. And so it ought to be held to all these standards and given all the scrutiny and accountability of political groups. But this is not happening.
Islam prohibit adoption.
Yes, that's right.
Islam prohibit adoption.
Yes.
And we got to expose this issue because they are using our system for their advantage and you know, they make the means justify the what is it?
The ends justify the means.
The ends, yes. But
yes.
They want to Islamize from our system. But we got to educate our government. Say Islam prohibit adoption.
Absolutely, yes. That's something that's based in the Quran when
Yes.
Muhammad married the ex-wife of his adopted son, and people were saying, "Well, you violated the laws of consanguinity. You can't marry a relative like that." And so he said, "Well, he got a revelation, a convenient revelation from Allah, that's in chapter 33 of the Quran, saying that adopted sons are not natural sons, and so there's no relation, and so he could legitimately marry his son's ex-wife."
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil. Thanks for calling. Jamie, do you have any comment?
Look, I would just say that the key point here is, again, the left has molded the boundaries of debate in such a way that you cannot say anything about Islam today. And so, therefore, when Geraldo speaks down to Pamela rudely and disrespects her and says to her, "Oh, you're just a provocationalist. You're just trying to get a lot of attention." Who cares if let's even hypothetically say that somebody's trying to provoke and get attention. It's not the issue. Now, first of all, we know that that's not what Pamela's doing that and why. But what kind of a counter argument is that? We need to confront these people and say this. Forget about the accusations of getting attention or being provocational. Here's the question. When the Fogel family was sliced up by those Palestinian kids and those toddlers were sliced up, are those people who perpetrated that crime savages? Yes or no?
Of course.
And is that savagery based in a book that teaches that Jews should be killed and Kafirs should be subjugated or executed? And that's where we have to start pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing that issue to get to the basis of the Quran. But the reason we can't is because the left has succeeded in our society to say, "Oh, wait a minute. If we admit that there's something wrong with the Quran and Islam, then we have to end up concluding that our civilization is better, that Judeo-Christian tradition is superior, and that it's worth protecting and saving." And that's a step that the left does not want us to take because it wants to destroy our society. And so therefore we demonize people like Pamela Geller. Let me finish with this. Aaron Burnett, have you no shame at last? Because I will say this, my heart is still with Axa Parvez. I lived in Toronto during that time. That 16-year-old girl only had a number in a field put to her memory because her family tried to push her into invisibility. And Pamela Geller ended up bringing memory to that little girl's life and built the tombstone for her in Jerusalem. And I want to ask Aaron Burnett, how many efforts have you made? How many tombstones have you built for the victims of honor killing? You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be thanking Pamela Geller for what she's doing rather than speaking with idiocy and ignorance about the things that you're speaking about.
Absolutely. Well said, Jamie. I think we've got a little bit of time for one more call right now. Zahare, are you there? Hello?
Zuhair, yes, I am
Zuhair,
here.
sorry about that, but hello.
Hello.
Please go
Yes.
ahead.
Yes, Robert. I have a question for you and your friend Jamie there.
Yes.
My question is very simple. How come are you so
How come they're what?
upset and afraid of Islam?
Why is there such a fear of
Are you
Islam?
obsessed about and afraid of Islam?
People are afraid of Islam because
Yes.
Muslims will kill you if you get out of line. And that's the bottom line. Not only will Muslims kill you, but they will do what we've been discussing to a great degree over the last few minutes, that they will assassinate your character. If they don't kill you in the United States, they will destroy you. They will defame you and smear you, make you out to be a bigot and a hate monger so that decent people don't want to have anything to do with you. Most people are too afraid to stand up against that and to take it and to keep going. But we have to get other people who we have to get over being afraid. And remember that the signers of the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for that great cause. And if we're not willing to give our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, then we will lose. And on that note, it's time again for another break. You're watching ABN's Jihad Watch program with Robert Spencer and our special guest, Dr. Jamie Glazov, and we'll be right back after this.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Sam Shamoon from the Jesus or Muhammad Show, one half of the team with David Wood. I'm here exhorting my brothers and sisters in the Lord Jesus Christ who've been blessed by the programs at ABN, especially by the Jesus or Muhammad Show, to consider and prayerfully consider to partner with us financially, because as you know, ABN is a viewer-supported satellite station. In order for us to continue to broadcast the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, not just to Christians, but also to Muslims, and not just to Muslims, but to those who are sitting on the fence and are considering embracing a worldview or seeking after God, ABN wants to reach these people, but can only do so with your financial support. So I'm encouraging my brothers and sisters to come alongside ABN and make a financial contribution to continue Jesus and Muhammad and other shows with the purpose of preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, seeing Christians get strengthened in their faith, Muslims coming to saving faith in Jesus, and others turning to Christ as their only hope and Savior. But again, we cannot do this if the support does not come in to continue to broadcast these shows. So would you please consider prayerfully asking God whether He'd have you support us on a regular basis so that we continue these programs and continue to bless the people of God, preach the truth of the gospel to the non-Christians, including Muslims, so that in everything we say and do, that Jesus Christ will be glorified and that His gospel will spread throughout the entire world. Would you please join us financially? Thank you so much.
We're back. Robert Spencer here for ABN's Jihad Watch program. Please give us a call and let us know what you think. The number is 248-416-1300. That's 248-416-1300. Our guest tonight is Dr. Jamie Glazov, author of the classic and essential book, United in Hate, which elucidates the deep philosophical and ideological convergence between the left and Islamic supremacist groups. That is the topic of what we're discussing here tonight, focusing on the left's attack on Michelle Bachmann as personified by the People for the American Way, 178,000 signatures on a petition to House Speaker John Boehner asking that he not reappoint Bachmann to the House Select Committee on Intelligence because of her great crime of raising the possibility that Muslim Brotherhood operatives may have infiltrated the U.S. government, and calling for an investigation. Obviously, Bachmann did not convict anyone, did not libel anyone, did not charge anyone with anything, but only asked that an investigation be carried out. And if that investigation had been carried out, which obviously it's not going to be, then maybe everyone would have been exonerated. But we are talking about people with very unsavory connections. We discussed earlier Huma Abedin, the very close aide to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and her ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. We discussed Muhammad Ali Biari of the Department of Homeland Security's Advisory Council, who actually threatened Dallas Morning News columnist Rod Dreher a few years back when Dreher was pressing him about some things that Ali Biari was not comfortable discussing. And finally, Ali Biari wrote to him, expect someone to put a banana in your exhaust pipe. In other words, expect someone to murder you by blowing up your automobile. And that is the man who is on the Department of Homeland Security Advisory Council. Also, Jamie Glazov, there was another recent manifestation of the leftist Islamic alliance. And can you tell us a little bit about Al Gore and Current TV?
Well, I'm still shaking my head at that one, but let's put it this way. Al Jazeera is known for throwing a party for a terrorist that dragged a little Jewish girl's head across rocks and basically bashed her head in. And then he killed, we also know that he killed the rest, he killed her father. And Al Jazeera threw a party for this man, and Al Gore is handing his television station over to Al Jazeera, and didn't hand it over, by the way, to Glenn Beck, because their ideologies weren't compatible according to Al Gore. But apparently the ideologies with Al Jazeera are compatible.
So that actually vindicates everything that you wrote in your book and everything in United in Hate that the left has scorned for all these years about how they have an ideological convergence with Islamic supremacists. It's vindicated there because Joel Hyatt, the co-founder and partner with Al Gore of Current TV, said that they see eye to eye with Al Jazeera. They have an ideological agreement with Al Jazeera, but they could not sell to somebody they did not have an ideological agreement with, and that ruled out Glenn Beck. And so you have an American patriot dedicated to preserving constitutional freedoms and values versus what has been dubbed Terror TV, a network that features as its most popular TV personality the Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the most influential and popular Islamic imam in the world, who has praised Hitler and called for Allah to kill all the Jews down to the very last one. This is somebody that they have an ideological convergence with. Jamie, at very least, I would be saying that it seems as if Al Gore has endorsed your book, United in Hate.
Absolutely, Robert. Look, the Unholy Alliance is right before our eyes. Go to David Horowitz's site, discoverthenetworks.org. It shows and documents all these networks of the left and how they're working together with Islamists. This latest Al Gore, Al Jazeera charade that's going on. It's just, the whole thing for me, Robert, is tragic and heartbreaking because people like Michelle Bachmann are being demonized rather than people like Al Gore. People that are standing up for the freedom of our society and trying to protect our society are being attacked and slandered. Look, we have a president of the United States that's sending F-16s to the Muslim Brotherhood. We have a president of the United States that's not saying a word about what's happening to Christians in Egypt, about the genocide of Christians throughout the Middle East, in Sudan. If he's a Christian, if he's a real Christian, when is he going to say a word for what's happening to Christians under Islamic Jihad? And that gentleman earlier that asked, why are we afraid of Islam? You know, I often like to answer that with, name me the name of one victim of acid attacks in the Muslim world. Name me the name of one honor-killing victim in the Islamic world. They are heartless. They have no heart. And I will say this, here's why I'm afraid of Islam. Fakhra Yunus, a Pakistani woman who committed suicide last March, an acid attack on her 10 years ago. She lived in Rome for 10 years, the victim of an acid attack. And her husband that did that to her is treated as a hero and is a flea at large in Pakistan. And the reason he is because Islamic theology serves as a buffer to what he did and the cultural rewards that he wins afterwards. We are on the side of the victims, and we are afraid of Islam because it demonizes women and demonizes non-Muslims. And yes, I am afraid of that.
Well, at the same time, we have to remember that at the heart of Islamic supremacism, at the heart of the jihad imperative, is a tremendous cowardice. Because after all, the whole thing is built on a lie. And we know how afraid they are of being exposed. And this is why the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and other Islamic groups are working to try to destroy the freedom of speech that we have in the West. And why the Islamic supremacist groups in the West that are aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood are working so furiously to tar and to smear and defame everybody who stands up because they're afraid. They know what they're doing is wrong, and they know that they are on the side of lies and hate. And so they have to shut us down because even though they have all the money and all the power and all the influence, we have the truth. And so we must, I understand
Absolutely.
the kind of fear you're talking about, but I need to emphasize at the same time, if we stand firm, there is no way we can lose.
Absolutely, Robert. Hey, look, I'm just saying that, does it frighten me when I see, and you look back in history and you see a certain ideology that led to the chambers of Auschwitz and Dachau and Buchenwald being built? Yes, absolutely, that scares me. Yes, a religion and ideology that teaches, the hatred of the kafir and infidel. Absolutely. But you're right. The truth will always prevail. And liberty is one of the most strongest forces in the world. So the truth is on our side. Robert, here's the key. When they sign 178,000 times for a petition against a hero like Michel Bachmann, we have to come back with a 1-2. 300,000 names on a petition to make Michel Bachmann the chair of the Intelligence Committee.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there again, it goes back to raising awareness, and that is our great task, so that we can get that army of 300,000 to fight for freedom. We have another caller. Tony, you've been very patient. Are you on the line, Tony? Tony, are you still there? He's gone. Tony, if you'd like to call back, we'll be here right up until the top of the hour. In any case, Jamie, the cause of raising awareness is hampered, as you know, by the fact that all the mainstream media outlets seem to have the same propaganda line. It's not as if you can change from ABC to NBC to CBS and see something different. They all say the same things. And so this is why it's all the more important that alternative media sources like frontpagemag.com, like Atlas Shrugs, like Jihad Watch, be promoted, be supported by all free people. And what would you say? Tell us a little bit about Front Page and what you offer there that is an alternative to the dreary party line of the mainstream.
Thank you so much, Robert. Well, look, what an honor it is for me to work for a magazine run by David Horowitz, one of the greatest heroes of our time. This is crucial to point out, Robert. David Horowitz is a former leftist who left the left and exposed the left. He knows how the left thinks. He knows how it operates. And he began his own fight against the totalitarianism of the left. Now, that's what frontpagemag.com is. It's a creation of David Horowitz. He's the creator and founder of it. And what frontpagemag.com does is focus on the war at home and abroad. And basically what that means is we're looking at the enemy that's coming towards us, but we're also looking at the forces inside that are letting them in. And David Horowitz knows that better than anyone else because he was a part of the left and he knows how they think. So frontpagemag.com is an expert on the unholy alliance, on how leftist forces work. And Robert, so to paint the picture, this is what's happening. The left has taken power in our society, and what it's done is it's forbidden certain ways of speaking. Then it goes to the attic and says, come on in, guys. Come on in, guys. Nobody can say anything anymore. And the Islamists come in. That's how it's working. We can't say anything today about Islam or jihad. Hey, Obama's even taking the words of radical Islam and jihad out of our intelligence manuals, out of our law enforcement manuals, as you know. So the left has succeeded in constricting the boundaries of debate and then letting the enemy in. And frontpagemag.com, run by David Horowitz, an expert on how the left thinks, is the creator of this magazine. And I'm honored enough to be the editor here. And the reason I care about it so much, Robert, is because my family, my parents stood up for freedom in the Soviet Union. They fought totalitarianism. And what we found in the United States when we came here was that the left was in league with the persecutors of our people. And so that tradition continues today, that the left is in league with the persecutors of Muslim people by Sharia, by Islamic Jihad, and of all other people. And that's what I really want to stress at the end. I consider myself pro-Muslim, Robert. I consider Pamela pro-Muslim, David pro-Muslim, you pro-Muslim, in the sense that we love the Muslim people and we want to come to their defense against the ideology that oppresses them.
Absolutely, Jamie, absolutely. It's one of the greatest calumnies of the leftist media that what we do is anti-Muslim, when what they're trying to do, of course, is suggest that what we're doing is simply out of bigotry or hatred against a group of people. And I think, well, okay, I'm fighting for the freedom of speech. I'm fighting for the principle of equality of rights of all people before the law. I'm fighting for the freedom of conscience so that a Muslim can leave Islam if he wishes without being in fear for his life. And so if that's all anti-Muslim, then okay, but it's really remarkable to say that that it's anti-Muslim to be in favor of things that would benefit Muslims were they able to have access to them. And so it's quite remarkable. We have Sodi on the line. Sodi, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you for calling.
Hey, it's really a pleasure to speak to you, Robert, and Jamie. I follow you guys pretty religiously, and just wanted to say, I really want to see us get over the hump. It just seems, everything you guys are saying, that the leftists and the Islamists they've controlled the debate, and it seems like the tide is getting stronger for them. I just want to give you guys all the encouragement in the world, because it just seems like, we're going to be on the losing end, and I don't know. All my friends, nobody is interested in this subject as far as like Facebook, or I have a large Facebook following. Nobody is interested in this subject, and I just so demoralized here lately. But ever since the election and stuff, but I don't know. I pray, and I just really thank the Lord for you guys. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you very much, and I thank the Lord for you. And I can exhort you not to be demoralized, never to give up hope. As long as there is life, there is hope. And this game is by no means over. You can look around you, and even if I understand you see a lot of indifference, a lot of willful ignorance, a lot of willful blindness. I certainly understand that. I see it very much myself as well. But at the same time, I also see many, many people in America and elsewhere in the world who are determined, who are adamantine in their resolution to stand and not to allow themselves to be bullied, not to allow themselves to be intimidated, not to allow themselves to be victimized by this. And I think we're going to see more and more people as the force of events keeps going, and as the left and the Islamic supremacists continue to rack up victories. Every victory for them is a defeat, because it wakes up more people to the reality and the magnitude of what is going on. Jamie, what do you think?
Well, I also want to stress, I'm so happy earlier that you said also to qualify our fear and to counter that with saying our bravery and what's on our side. And I'll say a couple things. First of all, frontpagemag.com is a multi-faith organization, so I'm just saying this multi-faith, it's multicultural. I'll just say this coming personally, that I'm a Christian, and Robert, we know that there's a spiritual battle here, and I'll just say as a Christian that with Jesus Christ, you cannot go wrong. And let me say something about Hebrews 13:3. Remember those in prison as though in prison with them, and suffer with them as though you are also suffering. What I mean by that is, let us remember the suffering people, whether it is Muslim people under Sharia, Muslim women under Islamic gender apartheid, Christians, Jews who are the victims of Islamic Jihad. If we have our hearts with the victims, something that the left does not do because it is heartless, if we have that heart, if we keep our hearts with the suffering, what I'm saying is this is a tremendous, tremendous, powerful vehicle and force in the battle we face, because there's also a spiritual dimension. What I mean is, let us not forget dignity and integrity and our hearts in this battle with evil.
Absolutely, Jamie. You know, this is, after all, this ABN is a Christian network. I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, and I'm glad that you raised this, because there's so many things that resonate. You can take, for example, the Lord Jesus' words in John chapter 16 when he says, the time is coming when those who kill you will think they are offering service to God. And I think that that time is upon us. And the Christian persecution that we are seeing in Iraq, in Pakistan, in Egypt, in Syria, in Indonesia, it is a manifestation of exactly that. And there's one thing, though, that I do want to say to the Christian community in general, and that is this. When I've spoken to Christian groups over the years, I find that very many people say, well, Jesus has won the final victory, and so I'm not concerned. And I think, well, Jesus has won the final victory. There's no doubt about it that this story has a good ending. But at the same time, if we look at the history of the church, the first few hundred years of the Christian church in the world, the centers of Christianity were Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. Now, of those five, Constantinople or Istanbul, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, Jerusalem, of course, up until 1948 and the establishment of the State of Israel, but the others for 1,000 years or more have been under the occupation of Muslims and have become essentially Muslim cities where the Christians are a tiny and often persecuted minority. My point is this: Jesus is certain to win the final victory, but this does not guarantee that the church is going to survive in any particular place on this earth if the Christians do not stand up and defend what they have. And I'm talking about defense. I'm not talking about anything that is contrary to the spirit of the Gospels. But there is nothing unchristian about defending oneself, defending one's home and family, and defending our civilization, which is a great Judeo-Christian civilization, against the attack and the onslaught of the Islamic supremacists. In other words, it is not, I think, a proper Christian response to sit back and say, well, Jesus is going to take care of everything. That has never been how the Christians have responded to challenges in the past, and it is not how we should do so. Do you, Jamie, do you have comment on that?
Well, and I will add that absolutely we need to stand with as Christians. We do not forget our persecuted brethren. And let me add, as Christians, who is it our obligation to stand next to? We have an obligation as Christians to stand by the Jewish people, to stand by Israel. And all of us must say, we are Jews. And right now with Israel, that's in the Middle East, and you can just see the enemies surrounding Israel and the attack so imminent. And we have a president of the United States that is supposedly a Christian, and yet he's bullying Israel and more worried about Jewish people building apartments than about Iranians building bombs that are destined for Israel. I'm just also a little bit confused in terms of a Christian president that is not doing what Christianity teaches us, which is to love and defend and stand by the Jewish people.
Absolutely, Jamie. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for saying that. This is very important. And we often find there's an increasing, with the growth of Islamic anti-Semitism in the world, there is an unfortunate resurgence of anti-Semitism generally. And Christians, above all, should resist this very strongly. And remember what Paul says in the letter to the Romans, that the gifts and the call of God are irrevocable. And that means that the call of the Jews to be the people of God still stands and is irrevocable. And we, as the ingrafted people of God, have to stand with what Pope Benedict XVI has called our elder brothers. Now, we have one last call before time runs out. Isa, are you on the line?
Good evening, Robert. Jamie, how are you guys?
Great. Thanks for calling.
A question and a comment. Don't you think there's a lot of appeasement that kind of remind me during the Hitler era in World War II?
Absolutely. Jamie, what do you think? Is there a lot of resonance with what's going on now and the Neville Chamberlain days of World War II?
Absolutely. Look, what can you even say about the latest development? You've got Morsi grabbing power, turning his country into a Sharia tyranny, Christians being persecuted in Egypt, Muslim Brotherhood rape gangs running around rampant, raping women who even show the slightest opposition to Morsi. And what does Obama do? What does Hillary Clinton do? Stay silent. That's what I call at least appeasement, and it's tragic.
Yeah, at very least. Absolutely. And Isa, you said you had a comment as well. Go ahead, please. Still there?
To us over here, I know there's a lot of things about trying to make the world more peaceful, because we, in the eyes, they're trying to make us look like we're the bad guys, and they want to make peace and get everybody all along. But I was just thinking, you know, even if you bring 90% of the Muslims to the Western world and you leave 10% behind, there's still enough over there to push buttons. No matter what you do, the minute they gain ground, they will turn around and turn on you. And these people in the media and the complacent got the most to lose in the end.
They do indeed. I think
Yeah.
that Jamie, perhaps you could sum up in just the last few minutes that we have. What do you think the outcome of the leftist Islamist alliance is going to be in terms of the left obviously thinks that they're going to be able to control the Islamic supremacists, but what do you think?
Well, wait a minute. This ultimately it's a death wish. When you have the leftist feminists going to Gaza to help the terrorists and they ended up getting raped, when you have leftist gays going to Islamist demonstrations against Israel and getting beaten up, when you have leftist Iranians going to build Khomeini's revolution and being slaughtered, when you have American communists going to the Lenin's Soviet Union to build communism and being exterminated by Stalinism, what I'm saying is these totalitarian revolutions always eat their children. But this is the heart of the left, Robert. They themselves want to sacrifice human blood for their ideals. And what United in Hate argues and shows is that in the end, it becomes the leftist blood as well. There's a death wish here. There's a hatred of man for who and what he is. And it's a completely destructive ideology. And that's why Naomi Klein wrote an article in The Nation magazine, Bring Najaf to New York. Najaf was al-Sadr's killing fields. She would be exterminated within 30 seconds of contact with al-Sadr's henchmen, and yet that's the system she wants to come to the United States. It's a very dark death wish, Robert, and today we're seeing it with the left trying to muzzle a hero like Michelle Bachmann.
Well, Jamie, I much appreciate everything that you have illuminated for us tonight, and I highly recommend your book, United in Hate, which should be available at any self-respecting bookstore as well as Amazon.com. And you also have another book. What is that one, very briefly?
My new book, Robert, is High Noon for America, The Coming Showdown. It's a collection of 28 symposiums that I did with the brightest minds, which included your mind, at frontpagemag.com. And overall, High Noon for America shows what the Obama administration represents and how it's hurting American security, but it also arms you and equips you with the truth and how to do something about it.
Fantastic. Jamie Glazov, thank you very much for being our guest tonight on the ABN Jihad Watch program. We've been discussing the leftist Islamic alliance, and for more information about that, see Jamie Glazov's book, United in Hate, as well as his new book, High Noon for America. And that brings us to the end of our time tonight. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and may God bless you all. This is ABN's Jihad Watch program. I'm Robert Spencer. Till next time, good night.